Welcome to the Home Business Podcast with Richard Captain Henderson, publisher of Home Business Magazine, and Sherilyn Colleen, managing editor. This how-to show helps you successfully operate your home-based business.
Greetings and welcome to the Home Business Podcast. I'm Richard Captain Henderson, your skipper at Home Business TV. Let's secure, foresee, and get underway. Most women are finding it hard to squeeze everything into one day and are feeling more overwhelmed than ever. Running a home-based business part-time can greatly increase that pressure. Are you ready to ditch that feeling of being overwhelmed and find work-life harmony? Today's guest, Megan Sumrell, believes that the majority of time management and productivity strategies on the market are failing women. Megan Sumrell is a well-known and highly sought-after productivity consultant. She can help our listeners, men or women, to better manage our tasks, planning, and schedules. So, greetings, Megan Sumrell. Welcome to the Whole Business Podcast. Hello to our audience.
Hi, thank you. So good to be here.
Great. Thanks for joining us from, if I caught it right, the entrepreneurial hub of Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yes, indeed.
How do you like that neck of the woods? Have you been in Raleigh for a while, or?
I always feel like I want to say I just moved here, but looking back, I realized I've been here for 20 years, so I can't say that anymore. But I love it here. Happy to call it home.
Yeah, you're a native for all practical purposes at that point. Yeah, we have a lot of people calling in from the Raleigh area. It's kind of an entrepreneurial hub. Is there like a quad area there or something that it's co-located in North Carolina?
Well, we do have the Research Triangle Park area, which is a massive hub for a lot of IT offices, which just tends to bring a lot of startup and entrepreneurial kind of lifestyle with it.
Well, I noticed from your background, you were also in IT before. So before you joined the corporate world, maybe you worked in the IT world around there? Or
I did. So I spent over 20 years in the software IT space, kind of all over the country, and then settled here in Raleigh, kind of right after the .com world collapsed. But was, stayed in that IT software space until, leaving corporate to become full-time entrepreneur.
Well, let's go down that path and get to know you better. So you did spend about 20 plus years in corporate IT, and then you punched out to become an entrepreneur. How was that transition?
Well, it wasn't just a simple overnight decision. A lot for me had to do with, I got married later in life, started a family later in life, and the realities of juggling a career and motherhood, it was no small task. And after a couple years, just found myself really craving more time freedom and more control over my schedule, which just, I think today's world, a lot of employers, there's a lot more flexibility than there used to be. And so I had this desire to leave corporate so that I could control my own calendar, but I wasn't clear on what that path was. And so what led me ultimately was, which I think happens with so many entrepreneurs, was I had a problem for myself, which was, how the heck do I get all this done? Juggling work and home life and all of that. And all the systems I'd been using for years were failing.
So your transition came up with a business plan.
It came up with taking myself on as a client, figuring out a better way to plan and manage my time, and then having other women in some networking groups noticing how different I appeared and started asking me for help and asking me to come speak on this topic. And so I really had to put a lot of thought into, is this something I felt I could unpack and make this teachable to share with others?
Now, did you decide to go down that route of, being a consultant like this before you punched out, or after you had punched out and then you started getting some feedback on it? Or
well, it was, I had not decided I was leaving corporate yet. I was being asked to speak at events, helping others. And that's when I realized I'm onto something. It's not just me that needed this. And what I'm teaching is helping others. And so I had a very pivotal talk that I gave where a lot of women came up after and said, hey, can we hire you?
You got kind of pulled into this then based on the talent
I did.
you just demonstrated. It's like a lot of people get out there and they're pushing, but you had a talent for this, and people responded to it, and then it enabled you to form a business model on it.
Yep.
Oh, well, great. Let's just go a little bit more into the business you've ended up in as a productivity consultant. How did you gravitate specifically into this, high demand world? So you've got some good feedback on some initial talks you did and interactions, and what made you then move in as this to being the full-time business focus?
Well, for me, it was, at the heart of what I teach is a framework. I call it the TOP framework for time management, organization, and productivity. And, I wasn't sure that this would be something that would translate for everybody initially. And so after working with a number of different women, teaching them the framework, helping them implement it, when all of their lives were very different, because no two lives are the same. The inputs of everything we're juggling are uniquely ours. But it gave me the opportunity to test this theory that this framework, the framework itself will work. It's the inputs that are unique and the outputs that will be unique to each person that goes through that. And so after, testing this out and witnessing the success with so many women, that's when I knew I've, for me, cracked the code on some key things that women need when it comes to planning and managing our time that look very different than what is often taught with time management and productivity in a very corporate setting.
I see. So it's one thing to have like some talent come off good at the presentation, get some good feedback, but you had to develop it into a system, something that you could replicate and could be translated into a business model.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's get started with one of the big three you pinpoint, task management. How do you get control? We get control over our to-do list, which just can seem to
they never
grow
end.
into never going to be able to get through it.
Yeah. So I kind of think like the tasks list is like playing whack-a-mole, right? You punch one down and 10 more things get added to your list right after you check it off. The fundamental shift that people need to make in order to get out of this very reactive lifestyle of wake up in the morning, you create the list, you go as fast and as hard as you can all day long to try and get the list done, and it never does. And then we rinse and repeat, right? But to understand a task list is not the same thing as a plan. And when we learn how to create a plan that encompasses an entire week, not just one day, that integrates the realities of understanding between all of your commitments, your obligations, both home and work, how much time do you really have to spend on your business, to spend on yourself, to spend with your family? And when you understand that and you shift from being very proactive in deciding ahead of time, here's how I'm going to spend those slots of time, instead of operating from this never-ending task list grind, that's when people start to really move the needle and actually feel like they're back in control of their life again.
So is it safe to say that the plan is kind of your strategy? It's it's for your foundation, and then your tasks need to fit into it and kind of keep organized that way?
Yeah. And it's also, you're never going to fit all the tasks into it. I shift people away from thinking of the term task list, and I just call it my master backlog. So here's the list of all the things I would like to.
You already know it's going to be a backlog.
Yeah, because it's never going to get done. And so when I can say, well, here's the list of all the things, kind of, think of it like grocery shopping. If I give you $100, you can't go in and buy everything in the grocery store, right? You're going to make very intentional choices. And so learning how to understand how much time do you really have in the week, and then marry it with the list of all the things. And, almost thinking about math, solving that problem of how am I going to spend my time in a way that is what my definition of productivity is, which is getting the most important things done in a way that doesn't stress you out.
Do you recommend going through your to-do list each morning, just kind of doing a reprioritization each morning on those tasks?
I actually don't. So I am very anti daily planning, and I'm very pro weekly planning. So I teach people how to create what's called a command center. You learn how to create your plan for the week. Now, that said, I'm looking at my plan for the day all day long, but we're shifting away from an unprioritized random list of tasks and moving into a very intentional, realistic plan of attack instead.
What'd you call that? Your ops center or your command center?
My command center.
I like that. Prior military.
Well, see, I worked with the FAA for a long time. So I love that visual of the actual command center there at the FAA. So I feel like it suits it well.
Well, planning is a theme we're hearing about a lot in productivity. What do you mean specifically when you use the term integrated planning?
And this, particularly in this day and age, so many people are, after the pandemic in particular, we're working from home, we're juggling, some flavor of virtual school, homeschool work, all of that. And, if I look back at my life of 20 years ago, I didn't need an integrated planning. I went to the office. I was in the office for 8 to 10 hours a day. I left and went home and never did the two lives meet, right? You didn't have cell phones back then, all of that. Well, in today's world, the good old days, everything is so tightly integrated with one another that you need to have a planning system that accommodates that. That means that I'm being mom for 2 hours and now I'm shifting to business owner and now I'm stepping into the volunteer and now I'm being pulled back as mom. And we need to recognize that that's the reality of so many lives, especially if you're running a home-based business. Holy cow, that if you don't get the right strategies in place to integrate that, you will end up doing what most people do, which is staying up late at night, doing the, hustle grind, getting up early, working late to try and build a business instead of integrating it in a way that makes it joyful.
As soon as you get tired and you're staying up like that, then you're just, you lose your focus. You're focusing on what's urgent versus what's important. And then it kind of goes down there. What about it's, I'm just seeing some things popping into my head. Flexibility. You talk a little bit about an hour on this and an hour on that, but one thing I see is it just, you try to set up some plans for how you're going to budget your time, but then you get overwhelmed with events and something else needs more time and something else just goes away.
Yeah, I like to call that planning for uncertainty. And everybody's life has a different level of uncertainty that they need to recognize and plan for. And mine ebbs and flows in different, stages and phases of life as well. And so one of the key things that I teach in the planning process is, one, to learn how much uncertainty do you need to accommodate, but then we very proactively actually create, reserved pockets of time during our week where we are not having commitments or to-dos plugged in there, so that, this happened to me this week. If it's Wednesday morning and you're about to launch into an 1.5 hour long project and the school calls and you got to get up and go to school and, get a sick child and come home. And now that slot's gone. You're able to pivot quickly by moving those into that kind of reserve space.
So I like what you mentioned, the term like uncertainty. You kind of work uncertainty into that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And 2 years ago, I had to plan for a lot of uncertainty because every day was different. Right now, I'm in a stage of life where things aren't as fluid. And so the reserve time that I keep for myself every week is usually about a 3-hour chunk on Fridays. And so if anything gets derailed earlier in the week, I know I have that planned time. And then,
your podcast is scheduled today. I could have gotten bumped out for something that came up this week.
That was an appointment. That's good.
That's cool. At least I got written into that schedule.
Yes.
So there's no uncertainty there. We've hit this a little bit. Another, time killer is our schedules. Do you have any more things you can add about how we can manage our schedule and prevent from being overwhelmed by it?
Yeah, I'll share one huge shift that I would love for all your listeners to do. And that is to stop using your tiny little mobile phone screen as what you look at to make decisions about your time. So here's a quick example of what I mean. If you're out and about and it's a Monday and someone calls you and says, "Hey, are you free for lunch next Monday?" And you pull up your phone, that tiny little screen, and you go to the calendar and there's a dot. So you click on the dot and you open up next Monday, you might see, yeah, I'm free for lunch. But what you can't see from your phone is that little window on Monday might have been kind of your one open time for that whole week. And now you've just filled that slot. And this is one of the reasons why people are constantly overcommitting themselves and getting overscheduled, because they're making decisions with this tiny little 5x7 screen of information instead of having
observation.
A clear picture of like, wow, this is kind of a full week. So how about we, can we wait and do this a week later? But everybody's planning from their phone.
There were some advantages of 20 or 30 years ago when you were doing this planning. You'd open up an actual planner.
And I still do.
I'm a big stickler in the size of screen for productivity.
Amen.
I actually put 2 screens up, but I know some people that seem to get their whole life done on a smartphone. I don't know how they do it.
They're overcommitted and probably exhausted.
Yeah, you're right. There's only so much you can do. So that's an interesting modern cell phone curveball into planning, right? And that actually could shake up the whole thing. But you also refer, Megan, to systems and processes for better time management. How is that part of the solution for gaining control over your schedules? If you hit a lot of systematic type themes here. So how can that help us better?
So I have a couple key systems. The foundation of all of it is this weekly planning system. It's one thing to say, hey, plan for the week. But if you don't have a set system for how do you sit down and plan, and how do you organize the onslaught of information coming at you so that when you sit down to plan, you have all the information there and you know exactly how to prioritize, organize, group and structure it in such a way to optimize efficiencies. That's where the magic happens. So at the kind of foundation of everything I teach is this weekly planning process. We start with a very basic one that's a 5-step process. And then as you get really good with that, you graduate to my advanced weekly planning process. It sounds like a lot. It's 10 steps, but I do it in about 12 to 15 minutes every week. And that's it, because of the central repositories of information and that rinse and repeat 10-step process of actually being very thoughtful and intentional of how to marry all of the things and kind of do a little, I like to think of it like a puzzle to actually get it into the planner in a meaningful way.
So that's kind of your system and plan. You base it on once a week and then kind of graduate up to a 10-step process and build it from there.
Yeah. And there's a monthly planning process as well. And then as you get really comfortable with that, then there's also a quarterly and an annual. But we start in the weeds because we got to get you out of the day-to-day grind of being overwhelmed and get that freed up first so that we have time to dream, envision, and plan again.
You got to crawl first, and then you start walking slow, and then you're running. But I think the key takeaway here is whatever you do, you got to have something systematic. You can't just kind of shoot from the hip each morning. You've got to have a step to doing it. But maybe we can also talk, see how this fits in. You have a ditch the overwhelm cheat sheet. So what's up with this innovation?
Well, I don't know about you, but I think at the time this hits me often, and I hear a lot of women will say this as well. There just come certain days where you're so overwhelmed with the amount of kind of that little running ticker tape in your head of all the things you're thinking about that needs to get done. This typically happens to me if I've been gone on vacation for a week, and as you're driving, back, and you start to panic about there's no food, there's no laundry, there's 1,000 unread emails, all the stuff. We get to a place where we can almost be paralyzed in inactivity because we just don't even know where to start because there's just too much. So I've created a 3-step process, again, very systematic, very, step by step of how to get out of that place of just being paralyzed by all the things and get back into action in a way that is very stress-free. So that's what that ditch the overwhelm process.
Talk about being stressed out. Are you hearing my dog? I might have, oh, well. I think he's
feeling anxious. That's all right.
All right. Quiet. What the heck? This is home base. I can do this on the podcast. Be quiet.
Mine's probably going to come running on in any minute.
I missed. So, as we start to wrap things up, I like to keep focused on what should we do? So what is the one thing every woman should do first thing tomorrow morning to start getting better control over their tasks and schedules?
So the very first thing that one of the first steps I take people through is having an honest conversation with yourself about where are all the different places right now that I store a list of things I need to get done. Because most people will have, well, I put some on an app, I've got some in a notebook, some in a car, some on that scrawled on the back of an envelope, maybe some in email. And one of the key strategies is to have one central location that is your hub for all of the things that are demanding of your time, all of those tasks, activities, etc. And so I would encourage everyone tomorrow to really think that through and ask themselves, where is my one central place that as things are coming at me, I know I can go capture it. For me, I use a free piece of software that I really love called Trello, because I can access it from my phone anywhere that I'm at. And that way, when I do sit down to plan, I only have to pull up one resource that gives me all the information I need instead of trying to, grab things from 20 different locations to try and create a plan.
I got to throw this one out at you because you're an expert. Maybe you can help me, but I'm overwhelmed. I'm Outlook and I'm high tech and this and that. But at the end of the day, I sit down with a post note, a large post note, and actually handwrite out what makes it to the top and what I need to work on. Is that messed up, or can I make that work?
I'm not, it's not messed up. And I always tell people, if it's working for you, then don't change it. The one problem with that churn of kind of getting the Post-it note is what we often miss is in that moment, whether you recognize it or not, you're kind of confining yourself to what can I do tomorrow? So you're only going to be thinking about those tasks that you can probably just get done in one day. And this is where people miss the opportunity to work on those larger projects that maybe need that intentional planning of, I can do some on Monday, some on Wednesday, some next week. And so that's where I prefer to steer people on that bigger picture planning instead of kind of that daily Post-it note lifestyle.
All right. You got me. That's going to be the first thing I work on tomorrow morning. How to put a little better system in that and make sure I'm looking at more than just tomorrow. Well, Megan Sumrell, this has been a great discussion on the timeless topic of time management. Do you have any final points you'd like to share?
No, I would just encourage people, a quote that I use often, or a little saying, is to embrace the idea that structure actually creates freedom. I think people are hesitant to plan because I think it's very confining. But when you lean into it in a way that works for you, it will create incredible time freedom.
Megan Sumrell, thanks for joining us today on the Home Business Podcast. To learn more about Megan Sumrell and her Ditch the Overwhelm cheat sheet, visit megansumrell.com or our podcast website for more information on guests. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Home Business Podcast. Share your feedback with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at our website, homebusinessmag.com. Subscribe to our newsletter, read the Home-Based Business Startup. For more information, visit homebusinessmag.com or thehomebusinessexpo.com. I'm Richard Henderson saying, anchors away. We'll talk with you soon. Until then, make it a great home-based biz day.